A German court has sentenced a former Syrian military officer to life in prison for crimes against humanity. It's the world's first trial concerning state torture in Syria. Now, the court found Anwar Raslan guilty of overseeing the murder of 27 people at the Al-Khatib detention center in Damascus. Raslan, as seen here during his trial, headed a notorious secret service unit that was responsible for widespread torture and killings a decade ago. The ex-colonel then fled to Germany, where he was detained in 2019. Germany is able to prosecute crimes that took place in Syria due to a legal principle called universal jurisdiction. And let's bring in DW correspondent Luisa von Richthofen. She is in Koblenz, outside of the courthouse, where she's been following the trial for us. Hi, Luisa. Tell us more about the court's ruling here.
As you mentioned, Anwar Raslan was sentenced to life imprisonment, but at this point of time it's difficult to say more since the court is still outlining its reasoning for this sentence. So they have been explaining how they came to this conclusion, first starting with an in-depth explanation of what they call a systematic attack on the civilian population by the Assad regime. In the future, we hope, or in the next moments, we hope to find out whether the sentence will be appealed and also whether Anwar Raslan will be able to leave prison for good conduct after 15 years. That still remains to be seen.
How strong was the evidence against Anwar Raslan?
The evidence in this case was very compelling. That's what the lawyers said, at least. This is the first case worldwide where the Caesar photos were used. These are photos from inside the prison taken by a defector, a military police officer who took photos of bodies that had been tortured. This was the first time this was used, but the trial also included several dozens of witness testimonies, so the evidence was quite damning.
What significance does this verdict have for the victims of Anwar Raslan, but also more broadly the victims of state-sponsored torture in Syria?
This is a hugely significant verdict. Everywhere here in Koblenz you can see relatives of detainees or former detainees themselves. They say this is hugely significant for them. This is the first time as well that Syrians have been able to tell about their experience in front of a court. But of course, many of them said, first of all, it won't bring their disappeared relatives back. And also, many of them, of course, would have wished these trials to take place not in the southern German town of Koblenz, but in Syria itself.
DW's Luisa von Richthofen reporting there from outside the courthouse in Koblenz, where a German court has sentenced a former Syrian military officer to life in prison for crimes against humanity. Thank you, Luisa.
Luna Watfa could find the way to the court in Koblenz with her eyes closed. She hasn't missed a single day of the proceedings since this landmark case on Syrian state torture began in April 2020.
There were moments in this trial when I thought it was too much for me. But then I always thought there's no alternative. If I were to say I can't go today, no one else would take my place.
Watfa, who works under a cover name to protect herself, was the only Syrian journalist continuously reporting from Koblenz. The trial of a high-ranking official of the Assad regime is a world first. But for Watfa, it's more than just a journalistic job.
This is very important to me because I was also a political prisoner. And when the witnesses give their testimonies and when they tell their stories, I also hear my story. In fact, right now, I'm also writing my story behind the scenes.
Anwar R. allegedly headed a secret service unit responsible for torture and killings at Al-Khatib prison in Damascus. Prosecutors have charged him with crimes against humanity, including 4,000 counts of torture and dozens of murders. They are asking for a life sentence. During the trial, Watfa relived her own experience in Al-Khatib. In 2013, agents arrested her for researching the chemical weapons attack on eastern Ghouta. By then, Anwar R. no longer worked at Al-Khatib. Watfa spent more than a year in prison, suffering serious abuse. Most of all, she was scared for her children. When she got out, she fled from Syria with her family and moved to Koblenz, where Anwar R. is being tried. But can the verdict really change anything for Syrians like Watfa?
Trials like this have a learning effect. The Syrians are learning from it. And if similar trials are possible in Syria in the future, then Syrians will gain the necessary experience.
Whatever the verdict, Watfa feels Koblenz is just the beginning, not only for justice in Syria, but also for her. She plans to write a book about the trial.